So as Fiona mentioned, this morning we're just going to be covering off on some of the key aspects that people often tell us that they find stressful about healthy eating and meal preparation at home. So the key things that people often tell us that they find stressful are meal planning, knowing what to cook, the time constraints that we can often have in our busy lives, and also cooking skills. So in this morning's session, we'll be covering off on some meal planning tips and tricks, some recipe inspiration, and we've filmed some recipe demonstrations to show you all this morning of 3 simple recipes that you might like to try at home. Unfortunately, there's no taste testing, but you'll have to try it at home and let us know how you go. And then we'll go through some other tips in terms of making the most of your leftovers and some recipe modification tips as well. So hopefully you'll be able to take 1 or 2 things away from this morning's session to help take the stress out of eating. So as a dietitian, one of the key things that we always get asked for is for a meal plan. How many of you would like me to give you a plan of what to eat for the rest of the week? Few yeses, yeah, it's often one of the things we get asked for. Unfortunately, in general, we prefer to work with people to make their own meal plan at home, because the reality is that we all have different food preferences, different budgets, different time available for cooking, different cooking skills, and also different nutritional requirements and food preferences as well. However, we have developed a few resources to help get you started, including a sample meal planner. So you can see this up on the screen, and some of you may have already grabbed one from the resource table out the front. If not, you can feel free to grab one at the end of today's session. But essentially it's a sample meal plan designed for 2 people. So the majority of our recipe cards that we've used in this meal planner are recipes that serve 4 people. So we've incorporated some of the leftovers of these meals into other days of the week to help to allow you to reduce that cooking time, which can be particularly helpful if you're someone that doesn't necessarily love cooking or doesn't have a lot of time to spend in the kitchen. We've also got a blank meal planner, which you can see on the other side of the screen there. So this is the one that you can take home and put into practice for your own meal plans in future. So take some of the tips and tricks that we go through today, use our sample meal planner as an example, but then put it into practice around what you would like to incorporate into your week. One of the key things I'd like to encourage you is that meal planning doesn't have to be set in stone. We want to be flexible with our meal plans. It doesn't have to be all or nothing. So we really want you to take some recipes but adapt them to suit your own preferences. Really just use a recipe as inspiration and then adjust the ingredients based on what you enjoy, what you have on hand, or what your nutritional preferences are. And we'll discuss more of this as we go along today. The other thing I just wanted to touch on is that the sample meal plan is just designed as a bit of a guide. As I mentioned, everybody has different nutritional requirements, and for more individualised advice, we would recommend you see a dietitian one-on-one. On the back of our meal planner, you can see on the screen there's a shopping list. This is another important part of planning your meals. Having a shopping list will help with budgeting, and it also helps to not end up with that 5th or 6th can of diced tomatoes that you didn't realise that you'd had in the back of the pantry. It also helps to prevent any impulse purchasing, particularly when we end up going shopping when we're really hungry and we end up with the whole 3rd aisle in the trolley. Our shopping list is also categorised, as you can see on the screen, so it's separated out into our different core food groups, and this can help for you to see how much variety you might be incorporating in your week. So you might have done your meal plan and written out your shopping list and then notice that you really don't have a lot of vegetables on your shopping list. And this could then trigger you to look back at your meal plan and see where you might be able to incorporate some more veggies in your week. So we'll move into our video with our recipe demonstrations. So we've got 3 recipes today. We've got an overnight oats as a breakfast option, homemade falafels for lunch, and then chicken stir fry with udon noodles for dinner. All of these recipe cards, again, as I mentioned, are available at our resource table along with a range of others. So we'll start off with our overnight oats. So these make a great option that require very little preparation, and all of the preparation that is required is done the night before. So it frees up your morning to do the other tasks that you might need to do. The overnight oats also make for a great mid-morning snack, and they're really versatile with lots of different flavour variations. So really use your imagination for the combinations that you might like to use. The base of our overnight oats is obviously oats. So oats are a great source of soluble fibre, which is really important for regulating our bowels, managing cholesterol, and are a great low glycemic index carbohydrate option, so great for managing blood glucose levels. We do recommend to choose rolled oats rather than quick oats for a lower GI option. So this recipe is really as simple as just incorporating everything into the bowl and mixing it together. So we've added our oats, some pepitas and sunflower seeds, which are a great source of unsaturated fats. That was some chia seeds that I just added in then. So they're a great source of omega-3 fats, which are really great for our brain and heart health. They're also a great vegetarian source of protein and a really good fibre source as well. We're then adding in some Greek yoghurt. So we've just used a plain Greek yoghurt. You can add it in at this point, or if you prefer, you can leave it to the end and just add it on top of your oat mixture. By adding it into the oat mixture now, it just makes for a thicker mixture, so it can be good if you're a bit time poor and don't have as long to leave it. We've then added a tablespoon of honey for sweetness. You could adjust this depending on your preferences, leave it out altogether, or swap it for an alternative sugar or sweetener as well. And now we're adding our milk. So we've used a reduced fat cow's milk. Again, you can swap it for whatever milk you prefer. We would recommend that if you're using a plant-based milk, to make sure it's a calcium fortified plant-based milk. So aiming for at least 120 milligrams of calcium per 100 mils of milk is a good place to start. Particularly soy milk is a good alternative as it has a good amount of protein, so it's the most comparable plant-based milk to the nutritional profile of normal cow's milk. So now we're just giving it a stir to mix it all together, and then we're going to cover it and leave it in the fridge overnight or for at least 4 hours. And essentially those oats and the chia seeds are going to take up all of the liquid to make it more of a thick pudding consistency. So we're then going to serve it into our glasses. Just give it a bit of a mix to incorporate any liquid that might have settled on top. You could also serve it in obviously a bowl, or you might like to serve it into the individual portions the night before to make it a quick and easy option in the morning. Even individual containers or glass jars can be a good portable option if you need to have your breakfast on the go. So this recipe serves 4, or if you'd like to have it as more of a snack, you might like to make a slightly smaller portion. We're then going to top it with some Greek yoghurt. Again, as I mentioned, we've used just a natural Greek yoghurt. Greek yoghurt really varies in terms of its protein content. It can vary anywhere from 3 to 10 grams per 100 grams of yoghurt, so look for one that's higher in protein for a more filling breakfast option. We're then topping it with some strawberries and almonds. So these are great for adding flavour and sweetness to our breakfast. Our almonds provide great unsaturated fats, which again are really good for our heart health, managing cholesterol levels, and then also some vitamin C and extra fibre from our strawberries. As I mentioned, this is a great option to really vary it up. So if you're someone that gets bored quite easily and doesn't like to have the same breakfast day in, day out, then this is a good one to try because the flavour combinations of the fruits and nuts that you might incorporate on top is really endless. You might like to try other options like some apple, either fresh or stewed, with walnuts or pecans and some extra cinnamon on top. Otherwise, something like bananas and walnuts, or even pineapple or mango with some macadamias for a tropical twist. You can also have your overnight oats warm if you prefer. If you do want to have them warm, then just leave the yoghurt out of the mixture and zap it in the microwave before you add the yogurt and the other toppings. So there's our overnight oats recipe. Again, as I mentioned, a great breakfast or a nice snack as well. So next up we have our homemade falafels. Falafels are a popular Middle Eastern patty made from chickpeas, spices and herbs. They can be bought pre-made in the fridge section of the supermarket. However, they're also really simple to make at home. We do require a food processor for this recipe, so if you don't have one at home, you could use a potato masher or a fork to mash up your chickpeas, but it might take a bit longer and you might require a bit of extra binder. So for this recipe, we've used flour to bind. You might need a little bit extra flour to keep them together if it's a chunkier mixture, or you might even like to add in an egg. So we've used canned chickpeas for this recipe, which we've drained, rinsed and then dried by padding with paper towel. You could use dried chickpeas as an alternative to canned if you wanted to, but you would just need to soak them overnight according to the packet directions. So again, this recipe is really as simple as just adding everything into the food processor. So we've added in our chickpeas. We then added in some spices. So we've added 2 teaspoons of cumin and 1 teaspoon of ground coriander. Again, these are quantities that you can adjust. So if you're someone that really likes those flavours, you might like to increase it a little bit, or if it's not something you have on hand, you could reduce it. We've then added 3 cloves of garlic, which has been minced. We've used a jarred garlic for convenience, but of course you could use fresh. If you are using jarred, then 1 teaspoon is the equivalent of 1 clove of garlic. So we've then added some sesame seeds. So we've added a tablespoon of sesame seeds. Again, they're a great heart-healthy unsaturated fat, and also add some nice crunch to our falafels. We've then added the zest of a lemon, some spring onions that have just been finely chopped, or roughly chopped, sorry. If you don't have spring onions, you could use a brown or red onion, but you might like to finely chop it and cook it off in a pan before you add it into the blender so that they're not crunchy in your end falafels. And then we've added some coriander. So if you're not a coriander lover, you could swap it for parsley or leave it out if you prefer. So then we've just given it a blend, and you can see that at this point it's still quite a crumbly mixture. So this is when we're going to add our binder. As I mentioned at the beginning, in this case we're using flour to bind our falafels together. The amount of flour that you might need will depend on how wet your mixture was. So particularly if your chickpeas were a little bit more wet to start with, you might need a little bit more flour to bind them together. But essentially what we're looking for is a mixture that holds together without sticking to your hands too much. So we've used about 3 tablespoons of flour for our mixture, and you can see now it's holding together a lot better. You might like to add the flour a tablespoon at a time until you see that the mixture's starting to come together. So then we're just going to shape our mixture into the falafels. We're using a heaped tablespoon so that we have similar sized falafel balls. You could use an ice cream scoop or just a dessert spoon, or simply shape them by hand if you prefer. So we'll use our heaped tablespoon and then just pat it together with the palm of your hand so that it's holding together well. This mixture makes 16 falafel balls, so it's 4 falafels per serve. So we're just going to repeat that process until we've used all of the mixture, and then we're going to leave it in the fridge for half an hour. So leaving it in the fridge is something you could skip if you're a bit time poor, but ideally we do recommend doing it as it will help them to hold together better in the cooking process. So once they're shaped, we're then going to move on to cooking them. You could freeze them at this point. So if you're not planning on using the full 16 falafel balls, you could freeze them prior to cooking. I'd recommend freezing them individually on a tray for an hour or so first before putting them all into a bag or container. That way they won't stick together and you can just pull out the ones that you need when you're ready to use them. You can then cook them from frozen or defrost them before cooking. Otherwise, you can cook them and then freeze them once they've cooled. So, to cook them, we've just placed some oil in a non-stick frying pan over medium heat, and once that oil's heated up a bit, we'll just add the falafels in. It is important to allow that oil to heat up a little bit first to prevent the falafels from absorbing all of that oil. So you may need to cook them in batches depending on the size of your pan. We don't want to overcrowd them because we want them all to get a nice even golden brown colour. They don't really require too much cooking time because most of the ingredients are already or could be eaten raw, but really what we want to do is create a nice golden brown crunch on the outside and make sure that they're warmed well all the way through. So we would give them about 5 minutes on one side, and then once they're golden brown, turn them, give them 5 minutes approximately on the other side or until they're warmed through, and then we're ready to go. So we'll just give them a turn and you'll be able to see there's a nice golden brown colour. The sesame seeds in particular that's in the mixture do go a nice golden brown and give a nice crunch once they've been fried in the pan. So then we'll skip forward because we don't all want to sit here watching falafels cook. Once they are all cooked, we're then going to serve them with a side salad. So as I mentioned before, about 4 falafels is a serve according to this recipe. You might want more or less depending on what type of meal or how hungry you are. We're serving it with a simple side salad just with lettuce, tomato and cucumber, but again, use what you have on hand or what you prefer. Things like capsicum or snow peas can go really nicely in a salad as well, or you might like to use a pre-prepared bag of salad if you don't have a lot of time or if you're not a huge fan of cooking. We've also just squeezed a bit of extra lime juice over the top for some extra zesty flavour and freshness. And we have made a dipping sauce, a homemade tzatziki, so simply with some plain Greek yoghurt, a de-seeded and then finely chopped or grated cucumber and some garlic mixed together. Otherwise, you could also buy a pre-made tzatziki or even a hummus dip to go with it as well. So that's one option for our falafels if you're looking for a lunch option or a light dinner option. Otherwise, if you do want a meal that's a little bit more filling, you could also make it into a wrap. So if you are making it into a wrap, we would recommend a whole grain wrap to have a lower GI carbohydrate source. We're just using 3 falafels in this case, but again, you could still use the 4 depending on the size of your wrap. Adding in our salad. The important thing is if you are someone that counts your carbohydrates, remember that there is some carbohydrate coming from the falafel balls themselves, from the chickpeas, and also wraps or pita bread can vary quite significantly in terms of their carbohydrate content. So from brand to brand or different types of wraps, the carbohydrate content can vary anywhere from 15 grams up to 50 or 60 grams of carbohydrate for one wrap. So make sure to look at the label of the packet if you are counting carbohydrates. Or if you find that your glucose levels spike at that 2-hour mark after something like that, it might be looking at how much carbohydrate was coming from that wrap and trying a different alternative next time. So there's our falafels, either as a wrap or just with a salad. Even if you wanted to, the falafel balls themselves make a great snack mid-meals as well. So then lastly for dinner, we've got our chicken stir fry with udon noodles. So stir fries are a really quick, easy and versatile meal option, and there really is a lot you can do with the base recipe. So depending on what you've got in the pantry or what you prefer, they're very adaptable and you can adjust it based on your preferences. So this recipe is a chicken noodle stir fry, and as you can see, we've also got a whole range of veggies that we're including as well. So the first thing we're going to do is toast off some cashews in the pan. So this is just a dry non-stick fry pan. We've not added any oil at this point, and we're just going to toast off those cashews so they get a nice golden brown colour and a nice toasty flavour. So our cashews provide some nice crunch to our stir fry, as well as providing some good unsaturated fats, which are great for our heart health and managing cholesterol. So our unsaturated fats are really helpful for increasing our healthy HDL cholesterol and helping to reduce our lousy LDL cholesterol. So they really don't take too long at all, and if you're time poor or if this is an extra step too far, you could certainly skip this and just pop the cashews on top at the end. We've now added in some sesame seeds as well, so we just added those in towards the end of the cashew toasting time because they really don't take very long at all, and you definitely don't want to take your eyes off of it at this point because they will burn very quickly. I know I've done that with nuts or pine nuts in particular. They're gone before you know it, and that's not what anyone wants on their stir fry. So keep a close eye on it, and once they've gotten a bit of a golden colour, we're going to take them out and pop them in a bowl to the side to add in at the end. Okay, so the next step, once we've got those out of the pan, which can be a little tricky, we will just add about a tablespoon of extra virgin olive oil and heat that over a medium heat. And then we're going to add in our chicken breast. So we're using chicken breast for this stir fry, and we've cut it into strips. Using a skinless chicken breast is a nice lean protein option, but if you wanted, you could swap it out for lean beef strips, prawns, fish even, or you might like tofu as a vegetarian alternative. So we're just going to add our chicken in and give it some time to cook, basically until it's cooked through and golden brown. So that would take probably 5 to 10 minutes depending on how big you've cut up your chicken. So we're not going to show all of that time, but we've skipped ahead here. Once it is golden brown and cooked through, again, we're just going to take it out of the pan and add it into the bowl with the cashews and the sesame seeds, and we'll be adding that in a little bit later. So next we're going to add the remaining tablespoon of olive oil to the pan. And then we're going to add in some of our real flavour combinations. So we've got some minced garlic and minced ginger. Again, we've used the jarred options here just for convenience, as they're handy to have in the fridge, but you can certainly use the fresh options and finely chop, grate or mince into the pan as well. We've also added in some spring onions that have just been roughly chopped, and then we've added in 1 long red chilli that's also been chopped. Again, this is something you can certainly adjust depending on your preferences. So if you're a real chilli lover, by all means add in extra chilli or use a small one if you're wanting to. If you're not so much of a fan and you just want some extra flavour, taking the seeds out and using a larger red chilli will generally help to reduce the heat content of that chilli. So we just need to cook those sort of flavours, the garlic, ginger, chilli, spring onions for a minute or so, and then we're adding in our veggies. So we've used a combination of carrots, broccoli and bok choy. But again, use what you prefer. If you're not a big fan of bok choy, you could swap it out for some other options like capsicum, snow peas, zucchini even can be nice in a stir fry. So really use what you've got on hand. Stir fries can be good for using up maybe what's left, what you haven't used in another dish. They really don't take too long to cook because we still want a bit of freshness to our veggies in a stir fry. So 5 minutes or so, or just until they're softened to your liking. So if you do prefer them a bit softer, by all means cook them for a bit longer. Then we've added in the juice of half a lime and some salt reduced soy sauce, which you can find in the Asian section of your supermarket. We're then just going to give it a bit of a stir before we add in our chicken and nuts and sesame seeds back into the pan. And then we're just going to give them a mix to incorporate through and heat back up again. You can see there that we've cooked some udon noodles. So your noodles you just want to cook according to packet directions, depending on what you've bought, whether they were fresh noodles or dried. They generally just need to be immersed in boiling water for a little bit, or some require to be boiled a bit like pasta. So just follow the packet directions. If you have something else in the cupboard, things like rice noodles or soba noodles are also a great low glycemic index carbohydrate option, which would go really nicely in this dish as well. Otherwise, if you're not such a noodle lover, you could certainly swap that out for rice. So a long grain basmati or Dungara rice is a nice low GI option as well. If you are short on time, or if you're cooking for only 1 or 2, then the microwave cups of rice can be a nice option, nice and easy, and also pre-portioned as well. So that can be another alternative. So then we've just added the noodles to the pan, and we just stir it through to coat with the sauce and heat them up if they've gotten a bit cool, if we cooked them earlier on in the cooking process. And there we have our stir fry. So nice and easy, very quick, doesn't take a whole lot of cooking time. Just going to squeeze over some extra lime juice and top it with some coriander. Again, if you're a coriander hater, just leave it out or swap it for Thai basil or something like that. And this is another one where if you don't have a lot of time for food prep, your pre-prepared bags of stir-fry veggies, whether from the fridge section or the freezer section at your supermarket, can be a nice way to add more variety into your day as well without requiring a whole lot of prep time. So that can be a nice, quick convenience option. So there we have our 3 recipes. So as I mentioned at the beginning, these are all incorporated into that sample meal planner, and the recipe cards are also available at our resource table at the front. So do feel free to grab those if you haven't already. but all great options and very versatile. So use the base recipe as inspiration, but then adjust it to suit your own preferences, your nutrition requirements, or what you have in the pantry. Okay, so just some other meal ideas. So breakfast is often one that we tend to get fairly set with, and there's nothing wrong with that, but if you are getting a little bit bored with your breakfast option, just some other alternatives. So smoothies can be a nice option, particularly in summer, and a nice portable option if you do need to get out of the house fairly quickly or if you want something on the run. Do just keep in mind with smoothies in particular the amount of fruit that you might be including in that. So we can very easily drink the equivalent of many pieces of fruit when it's in smoothie form. So just bear that in mind in terms of the effect that it might have on your blood glucose levels. Berries can be a nice option to add flavour, antioxidants and vitamins and minerals, but they're a lower carbohydrate fruit option, so won't have as much of an effect on your glucose levels. And then adding some dairy, whether it's milk or yogurt, can be a nice way to add some protein to make it more filling, but again, do remember that they're nice low GI carbohydrate options as well. Then the standard toast, it doesn't have to be boring. Having a nice grainy slice of toast or a sourdough can be a delicious breakfast, and try and be creative with your toppings if you are finding it a little bit boring. So things like cheese and tomato, eggs with some veggies, avocado, mushroom, spinach even, or even something like baked beans can all make for delicious breakfast or toast toppings. Having some veggies in your breakfast is really great for getting a head start on having those 5 serves of veggies in the day. Otherwise, if you're more of a sweet tooth, something like ricotta with some berries and cinnamon can be a nice toast alternative as well. And then our cereal, so a high fibre cereal, whether it's something like the overnight oats or a standard porridge or muesli, again topped with some nuts and fruit, and be creative with your flavour combinations to mix it up as well. Okay, and then we've got our lunch. So you might have seen this sandwich and salad builder resource again on our resource table out the front. This is a great basis to start with to think about your lunch ideas. So really it steps you through the process of what we want to sort of base our lunch meal around. And we would encourage you to base your lunch around the veggie or salad portion of the meal, rather than that being an afterthought or not included at all. So you can see in that green choose lots section, there's a whole range of different veggies and salad options. It doesn't have to be just your boring lettuce. And we want to sort of base it around that. So in this example, we've got some carrot, some cabbage, some pumpkin and broccoli. These might be left over from dinner the night before to help to reduce that food waste, use up your leftovers and reduce the amount of preparation that's required. Or you could do some batch cooking. So meal prepping is another thing that can really take the stress out of eating. If you're able to allot some time to cooking up a big bulk batch of some veggies or making a nice big salad, that removes one step of what you have to do during the week. Then we're just going to add some protein. So with here we've added either your canned tuna, chicken, some meat or eggs. Again, might be left over from the night before, or something that you can add easily that you've got in the pantry, like your canned fish. And then our carbohydrate, again aiming for a high fibre, low GI option. So in this case, we've added some legumes in the form of chickpeas. So in the blue section of the sandwich salad builder, we've got what we want to choose some of, which is our grains for that sustained release of energy, go for the high fibre, low GI option, and then our proteins, which are really important for helping us to feel full and satisfied in a meal. And then in the yellow section, we've got the choose a little. So these are the flavour adders, the enhancers of the meal, but they might be a little bit higher in fat or salt or whatever it might be. We still want to have some of them because we want to enjoy our food. So in this case, we've added a bit of avocado. Otherwise, you could add some nuts and seeds, a bit of dressing, depending on what takes your fancy. And then for dinner. So for those of you that have been to one of our sessions before, you might have seen us talk about our balanced meals or the healthy plate. So what we're referring to there is what the 3 main components of a meal. And this is a way of thinking about things so that you can easily incorporate it into the recipes that you might already be preparing at home. I often find that people are cooking healthy, nutritious meals at home, but it might be just the portion sizes that need a bit of tweaking to really help to hit your health goals. So the three components we have are our veggies or salad, and we want to aim for those to be about half of the meal or half of the plate, and then a quarter of the plate for our high fibre carbohydrates and the other quarter for the lean protein option. So that way we know we're hitting all of our core food groups, we're getting all the nutrients that our body requires in the good portion sizes to keep us feeling full and satisfied after our meal. So what that might look like at home. So in the example on the picture there, we've got half a plate of salad, so some mixed salad there. We've got our bean mix for our high fibre carbohydrates, and then we've got a piece of salmon for our protein. But you can certainly vary that up depending on what you prefer and what you have in the fridge at home. Mixed meals like stir fries or pasta can be a little bit more tricky to see because they're not obviously separated out into their different food groups, but trying to think about how you're incorporating the veggies can be a good place to start. So rather than being an afterthought, try and really base your meal around the veggies, adding lots of different colours and varieties to get all the different nutrients that we need. There we go. And then our snacks. So snacks can often be a bit of an afterthought, and that's where we can end up having those snackcidents that Suzannah was talking about earlier, where we get really hungry and we end up going for whatever's quickly available, which is often not the healthiest option. So trying to plan our snacks can be a good tip so that you've got a healthy, easy option on hand. Because if it's not the easy option, then it's likely we're not going to do it when we're really hungry or busy or distracted by other things. So try and plan your meals around the core food groups. So things like your veggies, your nuts and seeds, fruit, grainy, low GI carbohydrates, and our dairy options as well. And then I just wanted to touch on making the most of your leftovers. So if you're someone that's cooking for only one or two, or you want to do more of that meal prepping so that you're only having to cook once, but you've got enough for several meals, this can be a great option to still have a bit of variety so that you're not getting bored of the same meal day in, day out. So something like a bolognese is a great, simple option. Adding in some veggies into the sauce can be great to make sure you're still having that veggie component. Using some lentils or beans can be a great way to reduce the amount of meat that you need. So great for budgeting as well as reducing the fat and increasing the fibre of our bolognese sauce. But then there are a whole range of options of what we can then do with that bolognese sauce. So you might like to add some mashed potato on top and bake it in the oven for a nice shepherd's pie. You might like to add some Mexican seasoning and then make yourself some tacos or tortillas by having it with a wrap. Again, a whole grain wrap is what we'd recommend, some salad and some guacamole. You might serve your bolognese mix on top of a baked potato with a side salad, or of course the pasta, but just trying to think about your portion of pasta, serve it with a side of salad, or you might like to make a lasagna as well as another alternative. Things like ricotta or cottage cheese can make a quick alternative to a white sauce. So simply just smooth over some spoonfuls of your ricotta or cottage cheese in between your layers of the bolognese mix and your lasagna sheets, and then you've got a much easier alternative than your white sauce, and also tends to be lower in fat as well. And then we've got roast chicken. So another thing that can often end up with lots of leftovers. And of course, there's nothing wrong with a delicious chicken and salad sandwich. Sometimes you might want some other alternatives. So cooking some pasta, adding some cherry tomatoes, some spinach, and maybe a tablespoon of a pesto pasta sauce. Warm it through with some shredded chicken meat, and you've got a delicious quick pasta dish. Nothing wrong with your standard chicken and roast veggies, or you might like to swap your veggies out for some salad. Or if you want some different sort of options that you might not be more used to thinking about, something like a frittata is a quick and easy way to use up some of your leftover meat. So shred up the chicken, add it to some beaten eggs and some grated veggies, and bake it in the oven for a nice quick and easy frittata. Or you might like to make a fried rice. So again, shred up that chicken meat, add it to some basmati or long grain rice. Again, you could use the cup version if you're short on time, the microwave options. Use a pre-prepared bag of veggies, or else you can just cut up your preferred veggies, add some soy sauce, maybe a scrambled egg, and then you've got your quick fried rice ready to go. Modifying recipes, again, I've said a few times, we really want to encourage you to use the recipe just as inspiration rather than it being set in stone, so that then you can use it, vary it to suit your preferences. You might like to swap out ingredients based on what was on special that week or what's in season, what you prefer. So for example, this lamb shank with pearl barley recipe, again, the standard recipe card is available at our resource desk. But if you wanted to vary it up, you could swap the lamb shanks for another slow cooking cut, so something like beef chuck, chicken thigh or legumes for a vegetarian alternative. The veggies you could swap for whatever veggies you have on hand or what's in season at the time, what was on special. Things like broccoli, spinach or capsicum would also go nicely with this dish. And then pearl barley, if that's not something that you have in the pantry, then you could swap it for long grain rice, pearl couscous or pasta. The same with the herbs, so either swapping them for dried herbs if you don't have the fresh on hand, or swapping it for a different herb completely if you don't particularly like the one that was in there. Other times you might prefer to modify one of your favourite recipes to better suit your health needs. So for example, this steak and mushroom pie uses steak, butter and puff pastry, which makes it fairly high in saturated fat. And it doesn't really contain too much in the way of veggies, so it's fairly low in fibre. So if this was something that you wanted to include fairly regularly, you might want to make some modifications to make it better suit your health goals. So for this recipe, we've modified it by reducing the amount of steak and instead adding in a can of legumes. So in this case, we've added some red kidney beans. We've swapped the butter for some olive oil spray. We've increased the amount of veggies, so we've added in some frozen peas, zucchini and carrot. We've used a salt-reduced stock and swapped the puff pastry for phyllo pastry instead. So by making these changes, we've really increased the veggie content to make it more of that balanced meal. And we've added in some extra fibre with those veggies as well. We've reduced the salt and we've really significantly reduced the total fat and saturated fat that we're getting from this meal as well. And then lastly, I just wanted to finish, a lot of the time people say, if only someone would just tell me what to cook, I'm happy to cook it. Often we see recipes, we go around, we see them on TV or we see them in magazines, we might hear them from family or friends, but then when it comes time to actually making our meal plan, we can't think of anything. So having a way to compile your recipes so that then when you are setting aside that time to make your meal plan and write your shopping list for the week, you've got all of those recipes in one place. You might like to categorise them by main ingredient, like we have on the screen here. That can be really helpful to ensuring that you're incorporating variety into your week. Otherwise, you might like to categorise them by cuisine. So travelling's pretty limited at the moment, so why not cook your way around the world by trying different cuisines, different flavours. That way you're not getting bored and we're making healthy eating more enjoyable as well. Or else you might just like to categorise them by the type of meal. So that way when you're writing out your meal plan, you can simply go to your lunch ideas or your dinner ideas and you've got them all there ready to go to fill into your plan. So that's coming to the end of the session for this morning. But for further inspiration, there's a whole range of recipe websites and magazines. So there's the Australian Healthy Food Guide website and magazine that you can get in the supermarket. For Diabetes SA members, our My Life magazine has a whole range of recipes. You can also see a dietitian. So as I mentioned, for that more individualised one-on-one advice, I'd recommend seeing a dietitian. And they can also support you with developing that meal plan or modifying some of your favourite recipes if that's what you would like to do. You can see a dietitian at Diabetes SA, either with a care plan or self-refer, or else you can find a local dietitian in your area on the Dietitians Australia website. And of course, there's a whole range of Diabetes SA education sessions that you can come along to. Have a look at our education planner, again on the resource table, or have a look on our website for a whole range of options as well.